All right, guys, what is going on? And we're hearing some news. The Brooklyn Nets are a potential destination for Jimmy Butler, according to the New York Post. Brian Lewis, links in the description. The quote that we're hearing is Jimmy Butler reportedly has decided he'll play out next season and won't extend in Miami ahead of his opt-out in 2025. The odds of him picking up his player option are slim unless he agrees to a max extension with the Miami Heat beforehand. The six-time All-Star is the most accomplished standout on, I guess, the Brooklyn Nets trade list target if they wanted to accelerate their rebuild, as he allegedly liked Brooklyn. So let's get into today's video. It's the off season. It's just something to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts down below. Do you think this is something that could happen, that they would go after him? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and let's get right to it, as I definitely think this is something that warrants discussion, as Jimmy Butler is a player at this point that, okay, who is Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler would be a player that if you are the Brooklyn Nets, it's you don't want to be a rebuilding team. You've decided that this is not what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to try to accelerate the rebuild and be a team that is built kind of like how the Miami Heat were able to do when they brought in Jimmy Butler, to go from a team that had a couple pieces, like they had Bam Adebayo. Here you have Nick Claxton and you have Noah Clowney. So you're hoping that, oh, all right, we bring in Jimmy and this is going to make this team be able to take that next step. And that's actually like 100% a valid like assumption, especially with the Nets and their future draft picks being currently tied up to. So in this year's draft, they obviously have the potential to have 4 first-round picks. Like, it's pretty wild. And again, outside of they have a lot of stuff to build draft-wise. So if they wanted to go full rebuild, they can. And to finish the dream, or finish what they were doing last season at the same time, or not last season, before they brought in the big three, before they fired Kenny Atkinson, what they were doing, like D'Angelo Russell. Or they can bring in Jimmy Butler and build around the current young guys that they have there, if you think that's the right thing to do. I think the big thing you look at here is Jimmy Butler is obviously, a really good two-way guy. He'll play both sides of the court really hard. He's the cultural leader of Miami, and he'll stuff the stat sheet from scoring, rebounding, defense, playmaking, and he'll get buckets from mid-range, fadeaways, inside. I mean, his three-point shot isn't anything crazy, and I know this past season in the playoffs, Jimmy Butler was what? I mean, last year he was an absolute animal with like 26 points, but Butler is a guy who typically turns it on to a whole other level when he gets to the playoffs, and I think that's the whole thing with Jimmy Butler, is in the 2024 like playoffs, we got to see the big thing for a guy. He's a 5-time All-NBA player, but the big thing for him is that in this year's like past playoffs, he didn't play. I mean, in that one playing game he did, but this past year we saw what happened with the Heat, and when they didn't have him, they were able to kind of do their thing, but at the same time they weren't. So I think them having themselves an out to go a different way, and I'm gonna put on the board right here before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're gonna go and talk about, which is what would a trade for Mr. Jimmy Butler even look like? Because if you're the Heat, you want to still be good. Jimmy's making a decent bit of cash. It's not a little bit of money, just refreshing this. And he's a guy who, health-wise, hasn't been 60 games this past season, 64 before, 57 before that, 52, 58, 55 in Philadelphia. I mean, technically 65 that season, but 59 in Minnesota. He hasn't played 70 games since his last year in Chicago. So again, this is who would be on the board if you were going to be trading for Jimmy, and that's where it becomes difficult in my mind if you're the Heat and you're the Nets, if you're trying to iron out this deal. who's going to be the ones that you go after, you know? I think that's kind of like the difficulty. So yeah, let's just see what we can put together right here. This is Fanspo. So Jimmy Butler 48.7. Ben Simmons and Bam Adebayo, I'm 95% sure because they're both rookie max extensions. They can't be on the same team. Either way, why would you do that? There's a weird. I don't think Claxton would obviously be in this deal. My assumption is if you're the Heat, you would just want maybe something along this lines. And I'm trying to think of anybody else. I know in theory, Shake Milton would be somebody that they could maybe go after because he's an older player on this team. But outside of that, I don't even know if they would want Dennis. I mean, Dennis Schroeder seems like he would somebody that the Heat would want. I know they definitely wouldn't want Boyan, but at this point, you're sending outgoings 48.7, but incomings 51.5. If you were right here, you probably would say then throw in Nikola Jovic because he's a young guy that maybe the Nets would be interested in. And again, we don't even know what the draft pick compensation would be. But right here, yeah, he would have to cut up 311K. But right here, this is actually allegedly a fair deal. So if you'd have to find someone with a bit bigger salary than Jovic if you wanted to do a massive deal like this. And this is how you would have to do it for the money. Someone's going to be like, well, they would want to get rid of Boyan. I'm just saying, if I'm the Heat, I'd be like, I'd take less draft pick compensation if you'd give up these types of players. So if you're telling me Jovic's money's not enough, I definitely know there's no way in hell that they're going to be sending Jaime Jaquez in this deal. I feel like they would want to keep Mr. Josh Richardson. I really feel like if you did Jovic and I guess Pelle Larsson, because Larsson is on a regular deal, I believe. Picks wise, if I'm Miami, I don't have a pick in this year's upcoming draft, so I would. OKC has the right to swap its 20 for Houston's, and then I feel like this is. I'll probably go with New York's to the Heat. And that could really. Is there any other picks that I would want? I guess 20. If you give me like your worst 27 pick, which right here will go Philadelphia. Would this be too much? This is what the deal would have to look like. So you'd walk away with. I mean, it's not crazy. It's not a crazy deal. Nets have themselves two young dudes in Jovic and Pelle Larsson. And the Heat walk away with Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith to basically take up Jimmy Butler's spot, and they get themselves a point guard in Schroeder who kind of fits their like culture. I know it's kind of weird, but would that even? I'll show you what like the roster would then look like if they were to do that. That's kind of how. So this would be the Heat's roster: Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Bam Adebayo, Hero, Rozier, Haywood Smith. Now some people are going to be like, well, they're feeling like the Nets are getting gyffed. Maybe.